welcome back to everybody. And I hope you've had a good week. I hope that you have been finding these sessions interesting and giving you some reading material, reference material, some things to study. And we're going to continue on. And like Jeffrey said, I think that at this point, we have talked about enough diverse subjects that you might have some comments or you might have some things that you might like to ask. And so I thought I would just open it up and see if there's been anything on anybody's mind all week while you've been waiting for class. And if not, that's okay. I have plenty of other subjects to talk about, and we can always have another question and answer session at the end, but I thought I'd just open it up. So it doesn't look like anybody has any, oh, okay, here we go. And now questions are coming in. All right, so you mentioned that aromatherapy has limitations in what it can, excuse me, in what it can treat. What do you feel are conditions at the limits or boundaries that can be treated by aromatherapy? All right, so the main things that aromatherapy is good for is, first of all, the respiratory system. The way that we think about this is, where do essential oils come in contact with the body systems? What channels and in what forms, and what are their strengths and weaknesses? So they come in contact with the respiratory mucous membranes, first of all, especially when they are in a diffuser, steam inhalation, any aromatherapy form. Aromatherapy basically means contact with the air element and the respiratory system. So the respiratory system is the main area that aromatherapy treats very effectively. As a matter of fact, using essential oils in aromatherapy for respiratory conditions is a primary treatment. And especially if we combine it with herbs. There are limitations in what the essential oils can do for the lungs. They are primarily antimicrobial, expectorant, decongestant, mucolytic, antitussive, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they will treat everything effectively. They will treat things more effectively in the upper part as opposed to the lower part, and they will treat things that are less complicated. So of course, the lower in the respiratory system we go, the more chronic and complicated, the less effective it tends to be as a primary treatment, but still very effective as a supportive treatment. Second major area that aromatherapy is very good for is moods, emotions, relaxation through the olfactory and limbic link. And in that situation, we also have the opportunity to combine essential oils with herbs. And we also have the opportunity to combine essential oils with all kinds of enjoyable applications like aromatic baths and massage and so forth. Aromatherapy, essential oils can also be used quite effectively for musculoskeletal problems and conditions of the skin. They can be used as an adjunct supportive treatment for the digestive system, but they, as you know, can't be taken internally. So that's one of the great limitations. And those are the main systems where aromatherapy is best, all right? And if we look at what essential oils do, then we can see that they have very strong antimicrobial powers. They have a lot of potential as antimicrobial agents. They have a lot of potential in terms of affecting consciousness. But the things that they don't do are also their major limitations. They cannot be taken internally in essential oil form. They can be used as aromatic plants and are used in medicine quite a bit in all kinds of forms that contain essential oils. Like we can drink rose petal tea, that's quite safe. We can drink cardamom tea. And in this form, it's excellent for the digestive system, okay? But essential oils and even aromatic plants actually do not give any nutrition. to the body. They are not hydrating either, and those are the two main limitations. So that's a quick overview of their strengths and weaknesses. And so just to reiterate here, what do you feel are conditions at the limits or boundaries that can be treated by aromatherapy? Well, that's a big question because there's so many treatment. I mean, there's so many conditions that are out there. And so what I would say, the simple answer to this is basically aromatherapy is a really good adjunct treatment for almost everything. And that's a different way of looking at what I just said. What I described is the primary strengths and weaknesses of essential oils and where they come in contact with the body. The things that they are best at treating, because we come in contact with the oils in that particular way. And the things that they're not good at doing. We can't use them really in any form that has a counterpart to, say, adaptogenic herbs that give nutrition to the body, build up the body. But at the same time, all of you know from your training in aromatherapy that aromatherapy is an adjunct treatment that can be used for virtually anything. And therefore, it's not really a question of, does aromatherapy have all kinds of limits? It's just, where can we use aromatherapy as a primary treatment? And where is it an adjunct secondary treatment? That's really all it comes down to. And when we can use it as a primary treatment, then we need to know how to do it correctly and safely. But otherwise, aromatherapy is good for everybody all the time, almost, as long as people don't have oversensitized reactions to it from overdoing it for years and years, which can happen. People who work with essential oils a lot, or maybe are exposed to essential oils in some kind of overdose situation, they can become highly sensitized. And then they lose their ability to enjoy aromatherapy and fragrance. So I think that's a better way of answering it, because if we were to go through the long list of conditions, I would say, well, we can use it for practically anything, but maybe looking at the question in a little different light, are there some conditions where we don't want to use essential oils at all? And I would say that that's more in the category of safe uses of essential oils. We don't want to use essential oils internally. We don't want to treat ourselves for intestinal parasites with undiluted oregano oil, and things like that. But there are also individual considerations that have to do with sensitivity to fragrance and chemical environmental sensitivity. And I would say that's probably the best answer to your question, actually. What's at the boundary where we shouldn't use it? It's really individual, and the individual has a sensitivity. So I hope that was helpful. And I don't say anything else, but good question to start us off. All right. Now, as you know, our discussion, our meetings, our sessions, classes, are really weaving together several major topics. We're talking about plants and consciousness. We're talking about some therapeutics. We're talking about some aspects of plants from botany and some ecological considerations and so forth. And so we're going to continue with that. And tonight's class, I'm actually going to put everything in the context of one plant. And everything that we will study tonight is going to revolve around this one tree. And that tree is frankincense. And if you have frankincense, essential oil, you might like to get some out, have it ready. If you have perfume strips, that's even better. Otherwise, you can just smell it from the bottle. Now, we have a couple things to catch up on from last week. you notice that I put some files in the folder that were in last week, and they were in the folder the week before too. And this just means that I'm not getting these topics covered. So I'm going to try to cover them this week. And I'm going to start by giving an overview of some of the important principles, definitions, translations, terms, concepts about the word qi from Chinese medicine, and also about the word prana from Ayurvedic medicine and the Vedas. And qi, of course, is part of Taoism and qigong. And so these two words from these two medical traditions are very important to understand. And the reason that they're important to understand is because they are so directly related to aromatherapy. Herbal medicine can also be described in terms of qi and prana. Diagnosis and all conditions of health or disease can also be translated in terms of qi and prana. But aromatherapy and essential oils and aromatic plants have a unique place in these concepts because both qi and prana are terms that are closely related to breath and air and consciousness. And so this will give us an opportunity to basically look at the interconnections between aromatic plants, the air element, the atmosphere, breathing, and consciousness. And there is really no other plant that embodies, no other tree that embodies the depth and breadth of ethnobotanical history. And this is another one of the threads that I have been weaving in slowly, but now we're really going to go into it because I really like knowing the bigger context of where the oil came from botanically and what that plant meant to people through history and how was the plant used. So frankincense is the perfect example. I mean, all plants have some kind of history, but the history of frankincense is so rich in so many diverse areas that we can talk about frankincense and myrrh here tonight for quite a while and cover all of these different dimensions. So I'm going to start with qi and prana, and then I'm going to give you a slideshow and look at some trees. And this will give us an opportunity to explore a little bit about the term that we could call ecophysiology, which is the impact, the influence of the celestial and terrestrial energies and elements on plants, and how that influences the production of their medicinal compounds, in this case, essential oils, and how that translates into various forms of qi and prana, and how that influences various forms of qi and prana within us. So this is the bigger exercise that you have already met. I've introduced this kind of thinking to you previously. But this is how I think about plants, okay? A lot of science is devoted to the microscopic view of the compounds and their effects on biochemistry or the antimicrobial powers. It's looking at things very microscopically, and that's perfectly valid. But I tend to look at things more mandalically, and look at things in terms of their interrelationships. And this gives us not only a different way of understanding what essential oils are, what herbal medicine is, and how it works on us, but it also gives us more of a spiritual view, I think, more of a cosmological context to understand the plants and what they're doing and their life force. And the more that we learn to think mandalically like this and understand that plants are agents of nature's self-organizing intelligence, for example, that it's not just frankincense oil in a bottle anymore. It's actually an expression of cosmological intelligence. And the more we understand that, the more appreciation we have for it, the more we start to feel and see our own health and well-being in those terms. And the more we start to understand that the plants biologically are always intimately connected to our physiology. I mean, everything that's happening right now in our bodies is because of plants, okay? The breathing process, the oxygen, the gaseous exchange, which is the opposite of photosynthesis, okay? The digestive process, the nutrients in the food that we ate, all right? So every physiological process biologically is connected to plants, and we are inseparable from the ecosphere through the plants. And to me, that's a foundation for putting all herbal medicine into a bigger biological and spiritual context. And that way, we naturally cultivate or start to appreciate more the deeper levels of intelligence that are all around us and inside of us. Because really, the fact that our body is operating the way it is right now, it's because of a profound intelligence that's there. And that will take us right into the subject of prana, because that's what prana means, is intelligence. So let me give you a few points, and I did put this in your collection of files, but I'm not going to bring this up. I'm just going to glance at it for a few reminders here. But let's start with the word chi. And this is a word that has lots of meanings, but a lot of these meanings are really intriguing because they're really connected to aromatic plants. And the reason for that is because of the associations, all right? And so if we know these associations, then what we can start to think about is essential oils as chi, and essential oils as chi of the plants, or prana of the plants. And as we start to think of plants as giving us various forms of chi, then we can start to notice that they have effects on various systems of chi in our body. That's the reason for doing this exercise. Okay. So one of the first associations with the word is that chi means vapor, and vapor rising to form clouds. And that is a pretty clear association with essential oils, because essential oils are basically vaporous by nature, all right? So in a certain way, essential oils and aromatherapy are a better example of chi than a lot of forms of botanical medicine. A lot of forms of botanical medicine are really examples of earth or water, okay, or fire. But essential oils, because they have this vaporous, evaporating nature, we can say that essential oils are distilled chi in a bottle, basically. So chi also means, kind of by extension of that it's associated with gases of various types and anything in a gaseous state. So a diffuser, putting essential oils out into the atmosphere, is basically dispersing a kind of aromatic chi into the air, all right? And in Chinese language, qi also refers to the weather and to the atmosphere. You see, so all of these ideas are all closely connected. And this is actually a really interesting exercise just to learn something basic about classical Chinese medicine and then start to apply it in our thinking and our viewing of the world. So if we look at the weather as qi, then it starts to present itself as something different than just weather, okay? It's actually the energy of the atmosphere, and it's the behavior of the energy in the atmosphere. And we'll see similar things with prana also, but from a slightly different standpoint. Now, the prana, I'm sorry, the qi of the weather, of course, influences the qi of the plants. And there's a lot of real specific examples of this, but I'll just mention a basic ecophysiology point here that's directly relevant to frankincense. And that is, in general, the drier the environment becomes and the more water stressed the plants become, the more they produce essential oils. Okay, it's an immunological reaction. But the essential oil content of plants gets much higher during drought stress. And frankincense trees are drought stressed, and that's part of what we are also getting when we inhale the oil. And I think at this point that I've made a pretty good case for understanding that something like rose oil is partly produced under the influence of the sun and the moon and at a particular time of day, and that means something. So this also means something if we're looking at it through the standpoint of weather in general. It's a major influence on ecophysiology of the plant. The physiology of the plant that's coming from the environment, okay, that's influencing the plant. Now, qi also has some levels of meaning that are associated with the sun, and prana does also. But here's the main link, and that is that qi is specifically connected to the breath and breathing, all right? And this is the same with prana also. So with prana, we have pranayama, okay, or pranayama, which is the respiratory yogas, respiratory exercises, and meditations. And they are devoted to regulating, controlling, increasing, subduing, focusing prana. Well, the same thing is found in the Qigong practices that are just focused on circulating, increasing, cultivating qi. Now, right away, if we're thinking like this, then we have an opportunity then to link essential oils and aromatherapy to yoga and meditation practice and qi cultivation practices. Because if we understand that plants are offering us concentrated qi or prana, and we are doing practices to concentrate qi and prana, then we can see right away that there's a link. And therefore, it's pretty easy to translate, and a lot of this is already in popular culture, that there's a lot of essential oils that are very good to use during yoga class. And anything that is beneficial for the respiratory system is also very beneficial for pranayama in general, okay? But this also gives us a much bigger context because we can expand the entire concept of qi and prana into the diagnostic area and the treatment area. And so we can start to understand that there's different kinds of qi and prana, and they do different kinds of things on our qi and prana as well, all right? So closely related to this, qi also means smell and flavor also. And I'll bet that you didn't know that qi meant all those things. And now that you know, then you can start to look at essential oils as forms of qi and smell them and feel them as forms of qi. Now, in that file that I gave you, I went through and I outlined all of these parallels between these different types of qi in plants and the different type of qi in the body. The different cheeses, I guess, different cheese, we could say. And we see that the most fundamental aspects of qi in Chinese medicine are that they activate physiological processes, okay, especially circulation of fluid. Now, here's the thing. The more we understand the medical translation of this, the more we can apply this in terms of therapy. So qi activates all the physiological processes. And therefore, there is some link to aromatherapy at all levels, all right? So if we are, using the qi of plants, then it is affecting our qi. And somebody is asking, is that not the life force? Yes, it is the life force, but it doesn't mean life force in Chinese medicine, okay? That's kind of a modern Western translation. I'm giving you the subtleties of what it means, okay? It means vapor, it means clouds, it means atmosphere, it means weather, it means breath. And it means now, as we're looking at these things physiologically, it means that which activates our physiology, all right? That's one aspect of it. And so therefore, that which activates our physiology is life force, okay? So yes, it is life force, but life force doesn't really tell us much about its nature. It's life force that is vaporous. It is life force that is associated with the breath specifically. And that's different than the life force that's in food, for example. So there's qi in food, but qi is mostly connected to our breathing, all right? And that's where the link with aromatherapy comes in. So qi is also that which warms the body, and it is also that which protects the body. And there's a specific layer of qi that's on the surface of the body, which is called wei qi. And guess what that's for? That is our external immunity, all right? Now, here's a real important link, and that is that essential oils are actually the distilled molecular form of botanical immunity, okay? Plants produce these essential oils primarily for immunological purposes, secondarily for attractive purposes, but primarily for immunological purposes. And we can therefore say that essential oils are the wei qi, or the protective qi of a plant. And that's a specific form of a life force, you see. And so that life force that comes to us distilled in an essential oil is then used to boost our wei qi. And the perfect example of that is going to be using, say, eucalyptus in a diffuser during the cold and flu season, which, we know now it's all year round, but it's going to have atmospheric purifying effects. And it's also going to have effects in our mucous membrane immunological reaction to things in the respiratory system. So essential oils in the plants can be considered the wei qi, the protective energy of the plants. And we are extracting that wei qi, and then we are using it for our own wei qi. And that's a very clear link of how we use one aspect of the plant's life force for an aspect of our life force, all right? So that's where all the antimicrobial powers of the essential oils come in, all right? And that's where all the decongestant, mucous membrane regulating kinds of functions of the essential oils come in. So qi is also which holds everything together in the body. That's another aspect of it. That's not so clearly related to aromatherapy. But another one is that qi is that which transforms everything in the body, the food and the drink and the breath, because when we inhale, then it transforms inside the body. oxygen goes in, carbon dioxide comes out, metabolism happens, all right? And likewise, we have digestive qi. And that's another aspect of life force. If our life force is low, then our digestive qi is low. And that means that we can't assimilate nutrients. We can't extract the qi from the food with the same power. So these are just a few definitions of qi just to get us started. And these are things that have a clear correlation with the plants. And then through the plants, they have a clear association with our own physiology and therapeutic applications. Now, on that file that I gave you a very extended list of the different types of qi that are described in Chinese medicine. So we have the yuan qi, which is said to be stored in our kidneys. That's like our ancestral genetic energy. Now, that's an aspect of essential oils also, but you wouldn't think about it. You wouldn't smell an essential oil and say, oh, this is ancestral qi. But it's there because the plants reproduce year after year or lifetime after lifetime. In the case of, a frankincense tree, all right, it's not an annual plant, but generation after generation, that frankincense tree has been around a very, very long time. And so when we smell that essential oil from the frankincense or from anything, even if it's an annual plant, like oregano, I know it's also biennial or, perennial, but what I'm saying here is that the seeds contain the genetic information of the plant. And likewise, human beings contain the genetics from the seeds of the parents. And so therefore, there's an aspect of herbal medicine that is actually based on consuming and using a kind of ancient intelligence that's in the plants that is helping our ancient intelligence that's in our body. And this sounds really esoteric, but let's keep in mind a very simple thing here, and that is that a simple definition of disease is that the intelligence of the body is confused, or it's out of balance, or it has lost its intelligence in some way. And so when we feed the body healthy plants and we use herbal medicine, then what we're doing is we are actually supplying the body with a kind of intelligence that is helping it to correct its own intelligence. And part of that intelligence is very, very old, okay? The human body's intelligence goes back a very long ways. And the human body has been in a close biological relationship with the intelligence of plants for a very long time. And so part of what we are doing then when we do aromatherapy is that we are actually administering a kind of healing power that is linked to the ancestral genetic lineage of that plant that is helping us to remember something. So that's a little bit esoteric, but it's another aspect of herbal medicine to think about. So there's a list. I won't take any more time on this, but it's listed there. There's qi from the food, and there's qi from the air, which is different. And then there's the qi of the breathing, and then there's the qi of nutrients in the blood, and then there's a defensive qi, the wei qi, all these kinds of things. And what's really interesting as an exercise, which is there on that file, is that you can see that the plant has all these same functions. And so the human body and the plant body is actually remarkably similar in many ways. And so a plant has all of these different levels of qi. A plant is breathing, therefore it has a type of breathing, a breath qi. And that is also directly connected to our breathing and the qi of our respiratory system and so forth. So that's just there for you to study and enjoy and think about, and maybe start to look at plants in a slightly different way. And now I'm going to talk about prana. And there is also an article that I posted, The Aromatic Journey of Prana. And I posted that actually in the very first class, and we haven't covered it yet. So I'm just going to give you a few of the main points out of this as well. And then we'll do a little meditation practice with our frankincense oil to sort of bring all this into focus. So prana, which is not really articulated, that, or the word itself is not really described that much here in this article. There's a few quotes from the Vedas, but the word prana means that which moves, all right? And there's a lot of links between the concepts of chi and the concepts of prana. And the basic link is that they are both translated now in Western popular culture as life force. All right, so prana is life force in the Vedic Ayurvedic context. Chi is a life force in the Chinese medical context. But now we know that Chinese medicine broke it down into many layers of breath chi, digestive chi, immunological chi, genetic ancestral chi, weather chi, all of these kinds of things, okay? And the same thing is there in Ayurvedic medicine, and there are also systems of different pranas, okay? So there are 5 pranas that operate the body, basically, 5 primary pranas. There's the primary prana of the respiratory system. There's a specific specific prana of exhalation, okay? And there is the primary prana that is the conjunction between the nervous system and the respiratory system, specifically inhalation. That's the pranavata. And then the exhalation is a different kind of prana. And then the pumping of the heart is a different kind of prana. And then the downward moving effects of elimination, okay? That's a different kind of prana also. So there are all these different subdivisions of prana. So I gave you 4 so far. So the 5th type of prana is basically the digestive prana. And they correlate almost, pretty clearly with a lot of the same descriptions of qi in Chinese medicine. So what we're talking about then is life force, but we're looking at the activity of life force in different organ systems. And that's important to understand if we are applying herbal medicine, including aromatherapy, because we want to know what system of life force are we treating and what type of life force does the plant have. And so if you know that you are treating a particular type of prana associated with breathing, and you know that eucalyptus oil has that particular kind of prana in it that will influence it, then you can understand the respiratory applications of aromatherapy according to traditional Chinese and Ayurvedic medicine, which is you're using botanical prana for treating respiratory prana. So that's the starting point for the discussion about prana. Now, prana, like qi, has all kinds of spiritual and cosmological dimensions. Qi is not just weather, and it's not just clouds and vapor. Qi is also the creation of the universe. And likewise, prana has that kind of cosmological dimension also. And in Chinese medicine and in Taoism, they say that when qi disperses, there is space, and when qi accumulates, there is matter. And that has all these different connotations for death and rebirth and incarnation and all these things, and as well as applications in medicine. And the same is there in prana. So prana and qi are actually very cosmological spiritual concepts that have applications at the medical level. All right, that's the way to look at it. So prana has some specific meanings that are really important to understand, especially in the context of studying plants. And that is, prana has a specific meaning, the flow of information, okay? And even more specifically, it is the flow of intelligence in an organism. So when we are smelling an essential oil, what we are smelling literally is the distilled intelligence of that plant, okay? That means prana. And specifically, it is the distilled immunological intelligence. And if we don't really know, well, what is this essential oil? Where did it come from? One of the things that we can start to think about is, how long has that plant been producing that oil? And a lot of plants, they've been producing an oil that's very similar to that, if not pretty much the same, like for 100 million years, okay? Conifer trees have been around a long, long time. And so again, we get this kind of genetic ancient intelligence. And so therefore, prana means a lot of things that we can kind of all string together into one long definition of an essential oil. And part of prana means intelligence. Part of prana means immunity, okay? Just like chi, wei chi. Part of prana also means ancestral lineage, okay? And that means evolution, all right? So both chi and prana are the movement of time and the evolution of life. And for life to evolve, it also has to be protected. That's the immune side of it. And so therefore, one of the definitions that I like to use for essential oils is that they are the distilled evolutionary botanical pranic intelligence of a plant. And that's absolutely correct, okay? That's what an essential oil is. It's distilled, but it's the immune system, but that immune system is intelligent, and that intelligence evolved over a long period of time. And so that's a much deeper understanding of what an essential oil is, all right? If you add all those dimensions. And in order to add those dimensions, what we're doing is we're borrowing from these other classical medical systems. And we're now saying, okay, an essential oil is these different types of chi that work on these layers of chi in us, and they're these types of prana that work on the different prana of us. But the best definition that I have come up with for essential oils, again, is stringing together in sort of any random order that you want, that it is the distilled evolutionary botanical immunological pranic intelligence of the plant. Okay, so with that, what we can do is now we can start to look at, well, what is that intelligence? You know, what is that evolutionary life force, and how is it expressing itself? Now, the meditation that we'll do is very simple. I already introduced one level of this, and now we're going to do the other part of it. One level of it, as you will remember, is in the first class, I described how the sense of smell arises in our consciousness. And the molecules of fragrance come into the olfactory system, and they activate the receptor sites on the nerve endings of the olfactory nerves. And that's converted to an electrical impulse that goes to the brain, which recreates a holographic network, neurological network, that represents the external experience, okay? And that then becomes a perception. Now, all of those stages of things that happen instantaneously are actually happening in our nervous system, you see. And the nervous system is the primary conduit for chi and prana, especially prana. But it's all initiated through the respiratory system, which is also the major conduit of chi and prana. So therefore, what we can study is the flow of prana from the outside world through the respiratory system first, into the nervous system, and then into consciousness. And consciousness is another level of chi and prana, okay? So the other part that we have to consider is the external types of chi and prana that go into making the oil. And so that's where we can do this little meditation. And we just got a lovely, lovely frankincense sacra. I don't know if you can see it. Sacra, frankincense sacra, Boswellia sacra. And this came in from a sustainable, a network of villages that are taking care of this sustainably. And when we're done with this little meditation, I'll show you the slideshow and I'll start to get into some of the ecological sustainability issues, because frankincense is by far the most complicated sustainability issue. So this is frankincense, and a nice starting point for this is just to say, well, what's in the bottle? And when we understand what's in the bottle, then we can say, all right, that's the distilled end result of all of these forms of prana and chi that went into making this. And now it's a bottle full of these forms of chi and prana. Now we're going to put it on a perfume strip and we're going to inhale it. And now we're going to observe that all these forms of chi and prana go through this instantaneous metabolism process and become forms of chi and prana inside of us. Now, the end result of studying this cosmologically like this, for those who are so inclined, is that you can very easily start to perceive how everything that our senses come in contact with is ultimately connected to these cosmological dimensions of life, energetically and elementally, and they're metabolized into our consciousness on an ongoing basis. And this is a very profound, simple, science-based kind of spiritual insight that we are completely inseparable from everything all the time, all right? And so aromatherapy can become kind of a spiritual practice in that sense. So let's just go through and say, well, what's in the bottle? Well, it's a liquid, all right? But essential oils are a unique kind of liquid. They are liquids that are not hydrating. They are liquids that don't like water, okay? That's a paradoxical aspect of essential oils. They are a liquid that is hydrophobic. It floats on, it separates and it floats on water. And it's lipophilic. It loves to get on your skin, but its concentrated nature makes it very rich in fire element and is prone to causing dermotoxic reactions, okay? And contact dermatitis, which is inflammation, which is not detox, okay? So we have a liquid in a bottle and it's not hydrating and it tends to burn. But then we say, well, where did it come from? Well, we distilled it from the plant. And we say, well, why did the plant make this? And the main reason that it made this is because it is the immune system of the plant. So an essential oil is the distilled molecular components of the immune system of the plant. It's not the only immune system, but it is one of the primary immune systems in aromatic plants. And so now we say, all right, that's what the oil is. That's what it is biologically, okay? It is the distilled molecular components of the plant's immune system. But then we say, well, why? And what and how, okay? Well, the why is that the plant is protecting itself. But that right there tells us that it's a particular type of chi and prana. It's the plant's wei chi, okay? It's the defensive prana. There's a purpose for it. And we are extracting that type of chi and prana, and that is one of the main ways that it's going to help us, is it's going to help us with our wei chi and defensive prana. So now the next question, okay, so we know what's in the bottle, sort of, okay? We know the elemental components, liquid that burns and has a phobia of water, and it's also vaporous by nature, which makes it have an affinity to the air element. And we know the why, which is that it's a protective energy of the plant. But now we can say, how? Okay, how did it make this? And this is the physiology of the plant, okay? Because the plant made this through metabolic processes. And those metabolic processes were governed by an ancient intelligence. Okay. And so then we can say, well, what did it make it out of? Well, it made it out of the elements of its environment. So this frankincense oil was made out of the soil of Oman, okay? And it was made out of the sunlight of Oman, which is quite intense. And it was made out of very, very little moisture that the trees gather, very occasionally. And it was made out of the air that the tree is breathing. And those four elements are circulating inside the channels of space. And so therefore we have the elemental system that works very nicely from Ayurveda: earth, water, fire, air, space. Nutrients from the earth, a little bit of water, gathered mostly from the atmosphere, okay, fog, sometimes downpours, but not very often, and sunlight and breathing, and earth, water, fire, and air circulating through the channels of space. Now that's exactly the same thing that's happening in the human body all the time. So we can also make these parallels with the elements. So now we can say, okay, what did it? Okay, we know what it's made out of. What this oil is made out of is dirt, and it's made out of sunlight, and it's made out of moonlight also, especially with flowers, and it's made out of water and so forth. And the plant made it out of those elemental ingredients for its protective purposes, which is part of maintaining its ongoing lineage of existence, meaning that it's ancestral. And the intelligence that made this oil is the same intelligence that made frankincense oil in frankincense trees 10,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, 1,000,000 years ago. And we could go back and we could probably find that frankincense trees have been around a long, long time. I don't know how long exactly, but it's an interesting study to learn how old a species actually is. So conifers, like I said, some conifers go back like, 100 million years. So when you smell that conifer oil, that's a pretty old intelligence that's there. And frankincense is probably at least 50 million, if not more, years old. Roses, you might want to know, are relative newcomers here, 30 million years only, okay? But the point is that intelligence, that prana, that pranic intelligence, that botanical, evolutionary, immunological pranic intelligence is what made this oil. And it's in the oil. And that is part of what we get also. And it made it out of sun and moon and earth and water and air and all these things, okay? So now that should give you a pretty good definition of what an essential oil is from the biological standpoint. It's biologically correct. And from a cosmological standpoint, it's also true that, sunlight drives the photosynthesis in the plants. And the moonlight influences certain plants more than others, like the flowers and so forth. And it's true that the plants are planted in the dirt and they're getting their nutrients. So everything I just told you, it's completely scientifically correct, okay? And we sum it all up. And if we look at it that way, it's not just scientifically correct. It's actually amazing. It's a miracle to think about what's in the bottle. And that's why I like aromatherapy and essential oils and herbal medicine. And actually the food on the plate is exactly the same, because if you think about it, even the food that we had for dinner, it's the same manifestation of elements and energies cosmologically and terrestrially that have been brought together by this ancient intelligence inside the seeds, generation after generation after generation. And that's going in, and it's feeding our ancient intelligence that's in our genetics also. All right, now let's stop talking about it and perceive it directly. So now that the suspense has been building up for an hour, we're finally going to sample this frankincense oil. So go ahead and open it up. Put a little bit on your perfume strip or just open the bottle. I'm going to do it like this. And we're going to just do this all the way from the sun and moon into our consciousness. So close eyes and just bring the perfume strip under the nostril and inhale it slowly and deeply. And notice that that fragrance is an expression of sunlight, primarily. There's a lot more sunlight than moonlight in frankincense oil. As a matter of fact, the really, really good frankincense resins were called by the old doctors crystallized drops of sunlight. So smell the sunlight or feel it. Now, let's go through, breathe it again, and see if you can perceive the terrestrial elements, okay? See if you can perceive the soil. The soil gives the oil flavor, okay? It greatly influences its chemistry. It gives the oil a lot of its therapeutic power. So smell the soil. And also, see if you can smell the little bit of moisture that is in those desert areas. Water. And of course, the sunlight and the air that the tree is breathing. Okay, now these are the four main elements, and they are circulating through the channels of space in the tree. And so breathe it again and see if you can perceive the environment it came from, like we have done before in other contemplations. See if you can perceive that with frankincense. But now let's go to another dimension that we haven't talked about. See if you can perceive how old this tree is. Generation after generation, not this one tree, not this one generation, but how old the species of tree is. How far back in time it goes. Generation after generation. Every tree lives for hundreds of years, but it's been around for tens of millions of years. And that intelligence of all that time, that ancestral energy, that yuan qi is there. And that's a link. When we breathe this oil, we are breathing something very old, and that means something. Because we need, at some level, spiritually and biologically, we need a link to the earth, okay? And part of that link is the ancient intelligence, because we are very disconnected from ancient intelligence, any intelligence. So breathe it again and see if you can feel the pranic intelligence of the specific tree that it came from. That made the oil out of sun and moon and earth and water and air. And then breathe it again and see if you can feel how that intelligence made this for the purpose of protecting itself. And how that intelligence has been doing that for a long time. And how that now comes to us as a medicine for our immunity. And so now let's breathe it and remember the stages where the pranic intelligence of the tree comes into the sinuses as molecules Molecules are a kind of prana. And the molecules are an expression of a different kind of prana, the plant prana. And the plant prana is accumulating the elemental prana, and it is being driven by the solar prana. Okay. So when you breathe the oil this time, notice the prana and the chi of the sun has activated the prana and the chi of the plant. And that has metabolized the prana and the chi of the elements in the environment. And that has metabolized the soil. And now we are inhaling on our prana and chi of our breath. This molecular prana and chi that's made of sun and moon and earth and water and fire and air and ancient intelligence. And now we are breathing it in. And the prana of the molecules is becoming the prana of the breath. And that is then meeting the nervous system. So the molecular prana is becoming neurological prana, flowing inward to the brain. And neurological prana is becoming the prana of our consciousness. And so now see if you can tie the whole thing together. Breathe it in one last time. See if you can perceive all of those celestial and terrestrial forms of prana coming in and then flowing inward. From the perfume strip, it is chemical prana, but it is coming in on respiratory prana, and then it is becoming neurological prana. So it is actually all of these layers of prana are changing and evolving as they move from the sky and the weather into the plant, into the formation of the oil, and then into the breath, and then into our awareness. It's all one continuous flow of prana. See if you can perceive that. And then you can just put the perfume strip or the bottle down for a moment and just feel the body sensations. And remember that the body sensations are now responding to all those different aspects of the oil. Okay, you can go ahead and take a deep breath. And now you have a nice cosmological way of looking at essential oils. And I've been introducing this a step at a time. We've done this exercise in different ways, but now you have the terminology from Chinese and Ayurvedic medicine. So we are at 1 hour, and I'll just pause here and see if anybody wants to comment or ask any questions about things so far. Did you enjoy that meditation? Do you enjoy this view of essential oils? Does it help you understand plants at a deeper level, or essential oils at aromatherapy at a deeper level? Okay, everyone is silent.
I'm just going to remind folks how to raise their hands if they want to ask you a question that way. You can do that by clicking the participants button near the bottom center of your interface. That'll open up the participants panel, and the raise hand button is at the bottom center of that panel, unless you're on a mobile device. In that case, click the more button, and then the raise hand button is behind that.
Well, Jeffrey, I think we lost them all. I think they're in some kind of samadhi or something. So
Perfect.
Maybe they don't have anything, and that's okay. We'll check back later. All right. So with that, I will go ahead and proceed into the next part, and we'll talk about our slideshow here. And now I'm going to show you some pictures of frankincense and myrrh also. And so now we have covered essential oils and qi, that file. And also what we just did in our little contemplation there was also in that file, the aromatic journey of prana. And we have one more file on prana that I'll come back to after I show you this little slideshow. And this is to give you an overview now of a really fascinating subject. I think the frankincense is definitely one of the more interesting botanical species, but it's also one of the most complex in terms of sustainability. And when you see the environment, then that becomes obvious why. And it is also a plant that has a very long history with human beings. Okay, now all plants, most plants do, plants that people have been using anyway. But the thing that's really interesting about frankincense that makes it really unique in human history is its long use in spiritual practice and medicine. And this goes back thousands of years. And this entwining between botanical history and human history and spiritual endeavors is what makes frankincense totally unique, all right? And the region that it comes from. So as we go through these images, I'm also going to go on some tangents. And I'm going to start telling you about some of the complex issues that are involved here. All right, so let me switch over now to screen share. And here we go. So, not much water. Things don't grow very quickly. And that automatically tells us that reforestation projects are not going to be all that simple. So those little shrubby things, those are frankincense trees. This is in Oman. Okay, so let me see here. All right, these first few images are just to give you kind of a sense of the environment. It's dry, 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 hot, hot, very little water. And if we look at the fact that these trees survive in these environments, and we're thinking about these trees from the viewpoint of intelligence, pranic intelligence, then what we can say is that these trees have very strong life force. These trees have incredible pranic evolutionary immunological intelligence to live in a place like this. I'll also mention that the frankincense tree is the keystone species of the desert, the primary species of the desert. And what that means is that other plants and animals revolve around it in their life cycles and their relationships. So the frankincense tree is the core species that keeps together the ecosystems of other species around it. Now, I will mention that the main issue that is facing a lot of plants is overharvesting because of increased demand. And that's fine as long as they can regenerate quickly. But in the case of frankincense, the frankincense trees cannot regenerate quickly. And even though there are some marketing things that are out there about how these big companies are taking care of the trees and all of that, they're doing little projects on the side, but the trees are under extreme threat because there is really, in the bigger picture, there's no real long-term planning. It's very much like a gold rush of plundering the resin and the oil in the trees as quickly as possible, all right, right now. And certain species are under more threat than others. So this species, I'm not actually sure what it is. There's some here that I can tell you. This is most likely a form of the Boswellia sacra, which is also known, it's synonymous with Boswellia carteri. All right. Now, looking at that trunk, this tree is hundreds of years old, and it grew very, very slowly. Okay, so this is in the Dhofar Valley of Oman, and those are frankincense trees. Now, the Dhofar Valley of Oman is one of the most famous harvesting regions for frankincense. The highest quality of different kinds of herbs came from different regions historically. So in China, for example, certain mountain ranges were known to have the best of this species. Other places were known to have the best of this species. So the Dhofar Valley of Oman is considered one of the best collecting regions for the Boswellia sacra, and not just the Boswellia sacra, but a particular grade, which is considered to be the highest grade, which is the Hojari superior. Okay, now this one is in Ethiopia. Now the main harvesting regions where these trees grow is northeastern Africa and the Horn of Africa region. So what that means is Ethiopia, Somalia, Somaliland, and then Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and Oman. Okay, those are the main harvesting regions. There's some in Kenya also. And there is only one species of Boswellia that grows outside of this region, and that is the Boswellia serrata. And that is the source of an Ayurvedic frankincense, or a frankincense that's used in Ayurveda. It's very, very different. And that's because it's not in the same desert type of region. It's in a dry coastal region instead. So this is called the Boswellia neglecta. And one of the things to think about when we're talking about endangered species is that one of the issues that I have encountered is that people frequently become very passionately involved in conservation, but they tend to lump all the species together. And that can be problematic, especially if there's a boycott on something and it doesn't need to be, and also if we're trying to support sustainability projects. So this particular resin from this tree, the Boswellia neglecta, is actually very widespread and abundant, and it is not found on the market as an incense or as an essential oil. Now, we've had it for some time, and it is a very unique oil, and it is custom distilled for us in Ethiopia. And I was introduced to it by a distiller there, and he said, nobody's distilling this resin. What do you think of it? And it's a gorgeous oil, and it has some unique chemistry that makes it very good for the respiratory system. Okay, so what he told me about this is, he said, this is abundantly available and it's underutilized. So that is something that we need to be very specific about case by case when it comes to sustainability issues. Okay, there are sustainability issues with some species of sandalwood in some parts of the world, but then you can find that they're abundantly available, the same species in other parts of the world. And then we find that there are many large-scale plantation projects that are very sustainable, and they need money. They need to sell their products in order to continue being sustainable. So it's a really complicated subject. And when people get really militant about conservation, it can really become very problematic, because they can say, nobody should ever use any sandalwood oil, but then you have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. And if we don't support the projects that are being done sustainably, then they can't survive. You see, so we have to really look at the threatened status and endangered status on a species by species and a region by region level. That's just a quick overview of how complicated it can get. All right, so these are just a few more images just to show you the terrain, just to show you the environment. And I don't know these species, but I will tell you a very interesting thing about these. These two trees could actually be the same species. All right, there's 24 major species of Boswellia, frankincense. And the thing that is so fascinating about frankincense oil is that there are so many variations within one species based on a range of ecophysiology factors. So this has been confusing to botanists. And that's why one species has two names, Boswellia carteri and Boswellia sacra. They are generally agreed to be the same species, but they are very different depending on where they grow. And then the same species, Boswellia sacra, can also produce an oil and a resin that is very, very different depending on the ecosystem that it's in. So you probably have heard the term chemotypes. But with frankincense, the term that's most appropriate is ecotypes. And so there are ecotypes of frankincense oils depending on where they come from. Okay. All right, so here is a new one. And I will guess that this is Boswellia papyrifera in Ethiopia, but I don't actually know. And this one, I don't have an identification on at all, but it looks very different. And that's why I'm including it here, because there's a big range in how the trees look. And so again, same type of terrain. This one is papyrifera, okay? And I wanted to, actually, no, I'm sorry, forget about that. This one is not papyrifera, but I actually don't know the species. But the reason that I wanted to show you this photo is because frankincense trees, pretty much all of them, share a very unique characteristic, and that is that they don't have roots. As we know them, they have a foot that attaches to rock. Okay, now some of them will extend some short roots around the rock, wrap itself around. But most frankincense trees, let's go back. Let's see, that tree, for example, it does not have a root system, okay? What it does is it creates a foot, and it attaches itself to the soil, to the rock, in such a way that, it will grow, but it doesn't derive its moisture from the roots. you see. That's an amazing thing because there is no moisture in there. So why should they have roots? They get the moisture from the leaves and the fog that goes through. So here's a picture of a gentleman with a frankincense tree. Again, I don't know the species. And here's another one. And I don't know this gentleman's name personally, but I know the team that he works with, and I know the species. This is a group of botanists and distillers that work out of Addis Ababa. He's in that team. And I do know the main guy, and I'll show you. So this is a species of frankincense called Boswellia rivae. And Boswellia rivae produces a very, very different kind of resin and oil. And there's the resin, okay? So this is from naturally occurring wounds on the tree. And this is the immunological function of the resin. When trees are injured, they secrete sap to protect themselves. They're wound healing. Now, here's a direct parallel. Resin medicines have always been used primarily for wound healing. And so the tree secretes a sap. It has antimicrobial protective powers, protects the wound, heals the wound, and then we take the resin and we put it in plasters. For example, in Chinese medicine, frankincense and myrrh are combined together. They're called the two sisters, Mu Yao and Yu Shang, and they are made into a paste with other kinds of herbs, and they are spread on a cloth, and then they are put over bruises, broken bones, soft tissue injuries, and so forth. Now, here's a biological parallel to think about. Not only do the oils contain, or do the resins contain the essential oil that contains antimicrobial powers that fight infection, but the resin that comes out on the surface is actually the sap of the tree. And there's a parallel here again, because the sap of the tree has a biological parallel with the blood circulation in the human body. And so therefore, the sap of the tree is used medically for treating circulatory problems in the human body. So this is just a picture of a huge, huge frankincense region, okay? And this is, I believe, again, on the coast of Oman. And then this is in that forest. And here again, you can see that the trees are attaching themselves to the rocks. And this is what they look like closer up. And this is a really old tree. And this is characteristic of a lot of the species, is that they have this type of trunk and the paper bark. And this is now in Somaliland, and I wanted to show you how these things grow out of the rock cliffs. And so you can see that there's no place for them or no way for them to put roots down. And so when a frankincense tree falls over, what you see is, instead of a root system, you see that it basically has a foot that's like a bowl, okay? And the bowl has been attached, it's attached itself to the rock. So this tree here that we're looking at could be hundreds and hundreds of years old. And this is called the Boswellia freeriana. So this is the environment, okay? Elementally, just to think about. Now this is the Boswellia serrata, and this is in Maharashtra in India, on the eastern coast, but up in the mountains. And I took this picture myself. These trees are less endangered because they do have a seasonal monsoon that helps them regenerate and grow. But the trees also are very old, and these are generally harvested by tribal people that have been living on the land where the trees are for a very long time. And the government supports tribal people taking care of their natural resources. So in the sandalwood growing areas, for example, it's the tribal people who manage the sandalwood preserves. And likewise, where there's frankincense trees like this, the tribal people harvest the trees for the resin. And this particular species is the species that is used for extracting the boswellic acids. And you may have heard of boswellic acids, and you may have heard of the boswellic acid controversy that was going on between the two big multi-level marketing companies for a while. And one was saying, our essential oil has boswellic acids. And the other was saying that's not possible because boswellic acids don't distill into the essential oils. And the latter was correct. So here's an example of the bark, typical sort of papery bark. And this is the Papyrifera. And the thing that's amazing here, this is an example of the greenery that comes. Now, these trees have the capacity, these desert trees have the capacity to live for decades with no water, nothing at all. No fog, no mist, no rain, no nothing. They basically go dormant. And then when a rain comes, a tree can go through an entire cycle of putting out leaves, flowers, fruits, and seeds all within 2 weeks. Okay. So that's a pretty amazing biological accomplishment. So here again, the papery bark, more papery bark, more harvesting, and that's what this picture is here, all right? So the frankincense oil that you just enjoyed in your little cosmological meditation was distilled from a resin. And the resin was harvested from the tree. Okay, now that's where the sustainability issue starts, because it takes so long for the tree to regenerate, and there's such a demand for the resin, which is the source of the oil, that trees are being over harvested for their resin. They're being over tapped is what's happening, okay? And as the trees are over tapped, then that threatens their immune system, and the trees get weaker, and then they are vulnerable to disease and so forth. But there's something even worse, and that is that the economic situation in this part of the world is really, really hard for people. And this is mostly politics, okay? And it's chronic warfare, and it's chronic conflict. And wherever there's chronic conflict, natural resources are depleted and destroyed. And wherever there's poverty, natural resources are consumed faster, okay? And so the frankincense trees represent a really important source of income for many people in that area. But they're on this treadmill that they can't get off, which is that they need to harvest more than the trees can produce in order to survive. And furthermore, when it gets to a certain point, these people in these areas become so poor that they can't even preserve the tree at all. They are cutting down frankincense trees for fuel now. Okay, so that's where things get really bad. So some species of frankincense, not all of them, but a few of the major species, the botanists are saying will probably be gone fairly soon because of the combination of factors here. One, slow regeneration. Two, the areas are under a lot of conflict and political limitations, extreme poverty, extreme demand, rising demand for the resin and the oil. And this is the main equation that causes plants to become endangered, and that is high demand and slow regeneration. Okay, if it's high demand and it's rapid regeneration, it's not a problem. But in this case, the frankincense trees are the best example of slow regeneration. Sandalwood also, but here's the thing: sandalwood can be cultivated in a plantation. Frankincense trees don't like that. Okay, they're solitary desert trees. There are efforts that are being made to both preserve and to propagate, but it's much harder. So 20 years ago, Santalum alba, South Indian sandalwood, was becoming increasingly highly endangered in South India. But now there are huge plantations of it and other species that are available as well that are now making it so that that species is being regenerated. But frankincense is very difficult that way. So this is the harvesting. Now, it used to be that the harvesting cycle was part of the clan system, and specifically the Bedouin nomads took care of the trees in a lot of these areas. And this was linked to ceremony and prayer and seasons and their migration routes of their nomadic life. And their life revolved around this. Okay, they revolved around these trees and the harvesting. And so the tree is cut and it bleeds, and then they come back a few weeks later after it's crystallized and they gather it. And then what they do is they put the resin in caves to dry even further. And so it's a whole harvesting cycle that was part of the nomadic desert life for a long time. But now there's several things that are happening. And one is that the demand is up. And so the regulation of it is becoming harder. But there's also climate change happening. And a lot of people are giving up that nomadic lifestyle also, which might be a good thing in a sense of saving the tree. But from what I understand, that's not balancing things out at all. It's just that more people are going out and plundering now. It's not in the context of a sustainable spiritual nomadic lifestyle anymore. It's now basically the younger people want to go to the cities, and the people who want the resin are going out and getting it. In other words, the cultural context of taking care of the tree has broken down. So again, that's what it looks like. And here I'll give you the Arabic word for frankincense. It's called al-luban. And al-luban means milky, and you can see why. And I'll also give you a unique preparation that is done. One of the ways that the Arabs have used frankincense for a very long time is they will take a piece of frankincense, a resin tier, something really high quality, like the Hojari Superior. And you may have seen the Hojari Superior. Those are the larger pieces, very translucent, sometimes golden yellow, amber, sometimes blue, and sometimes green. Those are really the finest frankincense. And they'll take a piece of that and they'll put it into a beaker full of water, and they'll let it just sit. Now, frankincense is an oleogum resin, which means that it contains essential oil, but it also contains these emulsified ingredients. And so if you put a piece of frankincense into a container of water, what happens is the water turns into milk. okay, it turns into a milky substance that has essential oil compounds suspended in it. And it smells like frankincense and it tastes like frankincense. And it is used as a medicine. You can take, depending on the strength of it, you can take some of it internally. It is diluted, but you don't want to take very much. The best way to use it is as a mouthwash, actually. Just take a mouthful of this water and rinse with it. Chewing the really high quality resin is also one of the applications for good dental purposes, all right? And it also releases a small amount of essential oil at a biocompatible form into your digestive tract, which can be very therapeutic as well. Now, the purpose that I was going to tell you about, putting this piece of frankincense into a beaker of water and letting it sit for a while, at least a month, it can sit for months and months, is that old folks and students would take a teaspoon of this as a drink, as a brain tonic. And this is very interesting if you consider that frankincense enhances circulation, all right? And one of the main reasons that cognitive function declines as we get older is because circulation declines in the head, okay? So carotid artery circulation goes down, but frankincense enhances circulation, cerebral circulation. All right, just a few little, tidbits for you. And here's another picture here showing the tiny leaves that come out after a brief rain. And here it is again. These are the tiny leaves that come out after a brief rain. And here's more pictures. And here's the flowers and the fruits that you haven't met yet. So here's the flowers and the fruits. And these actually produce a really unique, rare medicine, okay? And there it is, that kind of nectar that comes out of the frankincense flowers. Imagine how rare that is. Frankincense flower nectar. Okay, so here's a couple other things. Here's the Papyrifera in Ethiopia. We carry the Papyrifera essential oil. It's quite extraordinary. It's unusual because it is actually based on a compound that's very different than the other frankincense oils. Most frankincense oils are based on pinene, which means that they have kind of a coniferous, sweet kind of fragrance. But the Papyrifera is based on a compound called octyl acetate. And octyl acetate smells like oranges. It smells like citruses. So this is a citrus fragrance type of frankincense oil. Citrus, it's not flavored, but it's a citrus aroma frankincense oil. And that difference in the chemistry means that there is some difference in the therapeutic applications. Now, as soon as I finish with these slides here in a minute, I'll give you the breakdown of the primary uses of the different frankincense oils. So here we are, more Papyrifera in Ethiopia, another Papyrifera in Ethiopia, and again another Boswellia serrata. And here we are back in Addis Ababa. And I wonder what happened to our picture of Dr. Ermias. But anyway, he's coming up next. Okay, he's coming with, there he is. All right, so this is Dr. Ermias Dagny, and he's in Ethiopia, distiller and ethnobotanist. And now he's showing us some myrrh. Okay, so this is a myrrh tree. You can see that it's very similar in nature. And that is the myrrh resin, okay? Now, myrrh is becoming extremely, extremely rare and very expensive. But there's this team, and now they are looking at some other trees. And here's more myrrh coming from a broken branch. And this is something I wanted to show you. I took this picture, okay? And this is the elephant tree in the Anza Borrego Desert of Southern California. And you can see that there's some remarkable similarities in terms of the species. Paper bark, okay, twisted trunks, and guess what it's called? Elephant tree, okay? And guess what the elephant tree is? It's a form of copal, all right? And so there it is, elephant tree in Baja California. In Baja California, there's large forests actually of this. And this is where famous resin. Copal means a lot of different things actually. Copal is a lot of different types of resins, but the resin from the elephant tree is also known as a copal. All right. And so here is elephant tree, and I took this picture. Also, this is Anza Borrego. You can find this tree if you hike from your car. And I nearly passed on to the next world from heat stroke when I went out to take pictures of this tree. All right, here we are. We're all done. Okay, so let me take a minute here because I remember that somebody did post something here. And so there's a question here, and it's about something else. And so I'm going to come back at the end of the talk here, and I'll cover this particular question. But I wanted to squeeze in a little bit more. So let's see. Why don't we talk about the best herbs? And now let me talk about frankincense and myrrh a little bit more. Now, I'm going to give you some of the primary therapeutic uses of frankincense, okay? And this is resin and essential oil. And so the major categories of using frankincense, resin and essential oil, and when I say resin, I mean burning it, okay? Or using the powder in poultices and things like that. So one of the major uses of frankincense is for the respiratory system, all right? And so there we can also see a link between qi and prana, okay? Because this particular tree, its resin and its oil has a direct positive relationship with the respiratory system. And it is also antimicrobial for the respiratory system. So what we see then is a good example of one of our primary topics in this course, and that is how people used plants traditionally for their aromatic purposes, and now what we're doing in aromatherapy. So traditionally, frankincense was burned in the churches, like, you know, by the kilos. And of course, in old Europe, the hygienic conditions were terrible. And so it makes perfect sense that they would just burn huge amounts of frankincense all day long just to keep the air fresh. But it also turns out that modern scientific studies have proven that burning frankincense actually will destroy airborne pathogens, like something like 90%. So I saw a study that came out, and it was what percentage of airborne pathogens would be destroyed by fumigating this particular church with frankincense resin. And they actually found that it was like 87% or something like that, that if you burn frankincense resin in the church, that it will kill the airborne pathogens. So that's respiratory, and it's also atmospheric purification. Okay, now atmospheric purification takes us to a very interesting aspect of frankincense and aromatherapy, because what I just told you about burning frankincense in the churches, well, that's aromatherapy also. Okay, we're just putting it in a diffuser instead. But now, if we're talking about atmospheric purification, we're talking about two things. We're talking about two major categories of atmospheric purification. One is microbial, and that means clearing out the airborne contagious pathogens. And burning resins, fumigating with resins, and doing it with a diffuser with essential oils will do that. That's one of the basic functions of aromatherapy. And that is a very clear link to an old, ongoing cultural application. But then when we say atmospheric purification, we have a second type of interpretation we could use. And that is that we're not clearing the microbial pathogens, we are clearing the psychic energies, okay? And this is not difficult to understand because bad smells create bad moods and unhealthy lifestyles create bad smells, you see. So people who are not mentally healthy and not taking care of themselves, who are depressed and withdrawn and, you know, antisocial and, you know, having a lot of anxiety and so forth frequently, they're not really taking very good care of the environment. And as a result of that, the home has some obvious manifestations of lack of mental well-being, okay? And at the same time, there are energies that normal people can feel also. It's not just that, you know, somebody who's depressed hasn't done the dishes for a month, okay, or their laundry is still lying around. It's also that you know, it's a normal human thing to feel energies in an environment. So that's another aspect of aromatherapy that takes us directly to the olfactory limbic link. And that is that when we burn certain resins and use aromatherapy, it has a mood uplifting effect. So that's also something that's linked to traditional culture, because the burning of the frankincense was also considered to be medicine for the mind. It was considered to be that which drove away the evil spirits, okay? And so in cultures, in many cultures, they would just have these torches of resins that would burn all night to keep away invaders and poisonous insects and things like that, and protect the animals and protect their homes, you see. So they would actually use resin flames giving off smoke continuously for protection, you see. But then, of course, the use in ceremony links us to a very, very big part of emotional well-being, because really the ceremonial use of aromatics, like burning frankincense in a ritualistic ceremonial way, giving thanks, making offerings, you know, feeding the deities of the sky, all these different things that are universal. All of these things have a direct effect on our mental and emotional well-being to do these. And what we can say is that spiritual practice is the antidote to anxiety and depression, okay? The spectrum of anxiety and depression is, it basically encompasses the vast majority of all of our suffering, mentally and emotionally. So what is relevant here is that frankincense resin and the fragrance of it, and frankincense as an essential oil, is well established now, not just through empirical traditional evidence, but now through modern scientific research, that the compounds in frankincense resin and essential oils actually work on our limbic system in a way that are anxiolytic and antidepressant, okay? And so lots of evidence starting to come out now that purification of the atmosphere is also purification of negative mental and emotional states. So that's a link that's very interesting, because frankincense takes care of both sides of the purification. Frankincense resin and essential oil basically purify the atmosphere of pathogenic microbes, and they purify our brain of negative mental and emotional states. So that's another side of frankincense. And of course, that links it directly to the spiritual dimension and to spiritual practices. So another aspect of frankincense that's very important is that the resin is very good for skincare. And that's where you see a lot of old preparations. And, you know, if you discover an old tomb in Egypt, and you open it up and there's some amphoras that have, 5,000-year-old unguent in it. It probably still smells like frankincense, and it's made from frankincense resin, not from essential oils, okay? Contrary to what the multi-level marketing companies say, essential oils have not been distilled for thousands of years. It's relatively recent. But aromatic plants have been prepared in all kinds of ways. And so frankincense was a huge ingredient, a major ingredient in all kinds of preparations all over Africa, all over Europe, all over Asia, all over the old world for centuries and centuries. And it went into many kinds of cosmetic products and skincare products and all these kinds of things. And that is closely related also to the other major function, which is circulatory. And we now know that that's also closely related to its anti-inflammatory powers. And so frankincense essential oil is a major skin healing oil. It is a major oil along with helichrysum for soft tissue injuries, scar tissue regeneration, skin regeneration in general, improving circulation, healing wounds, bruises, swelling, pain, and so forth. And that's closely related to its anti-inflammatory powers. So the resin was used for millennia for wounds and prepared in all kinds of different ways, and for the skin, okay, for beautification, preservation, regeneration of the skin. And we now have also modern evidence supporting the anti-inflammatory powers of frankincense, and that is in the boswellic acids. Okay, so boswellic acids don't come out in distillation, but they were used in Ayurvedic medicine when the resin was prepared into various forms because it's a component of the resin. In modern times, over the last maybe 20 or 30 years, I think, boswellic acids as a compound have been extracted from the resin of the Boswellia serrata from India specifically. And boswellic acids are now available. They're not called boswellic acids anymore. Now they're just called Boswellia, okay? And you can find products, at the Whole Foods on the shelf of whole body, the herbal products that are there. Boswellia as a product is now widely available. And what Boswellia means is that there are certain compounds that are extracted from a certain resin, and those compounds are taken internally, and they have anti-inflammatory powers that are frequently combined with things like turmeric, okay? So I'm sure that you know about Boswellia, and that's what boswellic acids are. So when you see something on the shelf that says Boswellia, it is the extracted compounds of the Boswellia serrata taken for inflammatory purposes, anti-inflammatory purposes. All right, so I think that covers the main therapeutic aspects that I wanted to talk about. And let's see here. Where are we? We're almost out of time. And here's a question about the elephant tree. Does the elephant tree produce a resin? And if so, is it distilled or used medicinally or therapeutically in any way? The elephant tree produces a resin. And I have never met anybody who has distilled it. Would you like to do that? You will have a very unique essential oil. I do know people who gather the resin, okay? And as a matter of fact, I have something that you might find very interesting. If you give me 30 seconds, I'll be right back. I will show you what it looks like when the elephant tree resin is harvested. I'll be right back. Okay, can you see this Chinese box? It's full of crystals. And these are crystals of elephant tree resin. So I thought you might like that. I have a resin collection from all over the world. That's very special in my opinion. I like this aspect of botanical medicine. And it links to culture and history very nicely, but it's also medicine. And the thing is that a lot of these things now are actually becoming very rare, okay? And it looks like somebody really appreciated it, so thank you. And I'll tell you a little bit more about it. I'll tell you how it was harvested, actually. Okay, so a cut was made in the tree, same as harvesting frankincense, okay? And as a matter of fact, the elephant tree is in the same family as frankincense trees. You could see the similarity, all right? They're very similar. But the way that the harvesters, and this is commercially harvested for as copal, all right? That's what it's used for in ceremonies there. And what the harvesters would do, and this is a traditional method, all right, is that they would take the leaf of the maguey cactus and they would scoop it out, and then they would attach it to the tree, okay, and make the cut above it, and then the resin would flow down into this leaf and then crystallize. And that's what you can see, is you can see the shape of the resin crystallizing inside the leaf there. So anyway, that's a good example of the link between botany and culture and history and medicine. You see, they're all part of the same thing. So let's see, where are we? Unfortunately, it's almost time to wind down, and I'm just getting started here. So let me tell you about the other files. Imagine that there's still files, and I still haven't covered it. Okay, so there's another file on prana that's been getting carried over week after week, and we can start with that. And then I put up a file here on herbs and essential oils for relaxing the nervous system. Let's start with that next time, because it's about time to really get into some of the oil and herb combinations. And what else is there? Oh, we can do this one right now. We can do the best herbs and aromatics for meditation and yoga. And that's a good topic to do when we're talking about the sacred sense. And I think that next week I'll carry through with this frankincense topic a little bit more and get into some related things like Palo Santo and agarwood and sandalwood. And so we'll stop with this file on the best herbs for meditation practice, best herbs and aromatics, but I will show you some specific techniques that I like personally. So let me put this up on the screen share here, and you can just go through this at your own speed and your own time. So what I've done here is just a list, and there's different justifications for it. This is not inclusive at all. These are just things that I put down a couple of years ago when I put this together. And I would say that these are all excellent. And the justification is still very strong for why these herbs are very good for meditation. So reishi mushroom, for example, the mushroom of immortality. It has a reputation for over 2,000 years of supporting the brain. and supporting meditation practice. And if you get the right type, it actually feels like taking liquid meditation in a bottle. You get the right species and it really agrees with you. Take a big dose, you sit down, you just feel like, oh, wow, now I'm meditating. Lion's mane, neuroprotective. And that's a good criteria, actually, for why are things good for meditation? Because they protect the brain. Ginseng, very famous adjunct to meditation practice. Milky oat seed tincture is very good for nourishing an exhausted nervous system. Tulsi, of course, is a very spiritual herb, but also strengthens the brain, the prana of the brain. Rosemary, we know, is very good for the prana of the brain and enhances memory, both as tea and as essential oil. And the same with Tulsi. Lemon balm, the same, both as tea and as essential oil and aromatherapy. That's good for the brain. And here's the simple concept of combining, that you can drink the tea and you can use the same species in aromatherapy, and you're getting it through two different channels. So you can put some lemon balm in your diffuser and drink your lemon balm tea, and you're getting a double dose through the digestive system and the olfactory and the respiratory system all at once. Bacopa and Gotu Kola, famous nervine tonics, turmeric, anti-inflammatory for the brain, ginkgo, cerebral circulation, but be careful when you take ginkgo. Don't take it if you're on blood thinners. Amla, famous Ayurvedic herb for rejuvenation. Calamus, Ayurvedic herb, should only be used in medicated oil form for the nostrils. And then we combine that with aromatics for meditation. And there's all these different justifications. And basically, when it comes to aromatics, you can find any reason to use any oil that you like. And it's all good, because if you like it, then it works. Lavender, rosemary, conifers, these are more common oils that can be used to support meditation. But then the things that have the deeper spiritual kind of connotations, agarwood and sandalwood, palo santo and frankincense. Cistus is an intriguing oil, and rose is very nice also. And I'll tell you next week about a few ways that we can use these. And then we go through again, and there's a few herbs for yoga, and then a few aromatics for yoga as well. All right. So now, all right, now that we're out of time, suddenly some comments are coming in. Well, thank you. You're most welcome. Where can you get good quality herbs for meditation? How about if I give you a list of sources next week? Some of my favorite sources. I'll do that. And thank you, Meditative Frankincense Voyage. Well, thank you for doing that. And good. Glad that you feel some new reverence for plants and trees. Okay, let's see. Here's a new one. Am I correct in the traditional use of the elephant tree resin being used for skin disorders? In general, resins are used for skin disorders, okay? All kinds of things. And that includes conifer resins also. So a lot of the things that we see, therapeutic applications of frankincense resin, we have a counterpart for it in North America with the conifer trees. So one of the species that I'm really familiar with is the pinon pine in the Rocky Mountains and the Southwest. And the use of the pinon pine resin and the essential oil parallels a lot of the old traditional uses of frankincense resin. But to answer your question, elephant tree is in the same basic category. Elephant tree resin can be thought of as a kind of frankincense of the Americas. All right, that's the way to think about it. So yes. And let me go back here because I think there was something else. That was truly interesting about frankincense. I thought I was being careful about sourcing my oils and herbs, but I see I can dive in. Now with frankincense oil, it's really complicated in terms of quality control. I can come back to that a little bit next week, but as you know, quality control issues in the essential oil industry are pretty complicated, and frankincense is really complicated. Again, it's the same basic equation: big demand, okay, and slow regeneration. And if there's big demand, limited supplies especially, that's where adulteration and contamination comes in, all right? Does elephant tree produce a resin? And if so, is it distilled or used medicinally, therapeutically? Yes, same basic answer. Think of elephant tree as like the frankincense of Central and Central America specifically, and Southern US, okay? Let's see, there was something else about breastfeeding here. Okay, what is your opinion about taking herbal tinctures and teas for someone who is breastfeeding? Is there a safer modality for incorporating plant medicines for breastfeeding mothers? Well, we could have a whole weekend class on this, but the simple answer is keep the aromatherapy away from infants. Don't expose them to essential oil contact directly on the skin for sure. And breastfeeding in general, if the herbs are more in the category of food grade nutritive herbs, then they will generally be fairly safe. And there's actually a whole category of herbs that are really nutritive for nursing mothers to help produce more milk. Fennel seed, for example, milky oat seed, shatavari from Ayurveda, things like that. The categories of herbs that should be avoided during breastfeeding are going to be the things that are really strongly medicinal and bitter for the most part, because if it's bitter, it's going to get in the milk, and then the baby's going to get diarrhea from it. So this is a subject where there's no agreement, actually. It goes on the one hand, there are many instances, many examples, many cases where nursing mothers have always used certain species of herbs to support their nursing. And once you know the basics of what those are, then you're safe with that. But they're nutritive in general. They're blood building, blood tonics, adaptogens, nutritive herbs are generally safe in a lot of ways. But then everything else is pretty much out, okay? All right, I hope that was helpful. That's a huge subject. And all right, so lots of appreciation. Thank you very much. And I think that we'll wind it up. And thank you, Jeffrey, for staying late. Thank you, all of you, for staying late. And have a wonderful week. And now when you smell your essential oils, you can go into some more of these dimensions of it. And what we'll do next time is we'll pick up on some of these cultural things that are also in the oil, because what we didn't smell, I mean, I gave you the whole cosmological sun and moon and 5 elements and ancient intelligence and flow of prana into the brain. But what I didn't tell you is that every essential oil is also an aromatic representation of many different important things in society and economics and environment and culture and history and all these kinds of things. So the more we study and appreciate the essential oils in terms of all the different internal dimensions, as we're calling this class, the more deeply we appreciate the plants and the more deeply we appreciate aromatherapy. And I think that the subject is extremely rich, and it's important to understand these things, you know, because we're losing a lot of it. We're losing a lot of cultural cohesiveness now, and we're losing the connection to the plants. And the more that we can kind of hold these things together in our awareness and appreciate them at that level, the more sensitive we are to the world of plants in general and all the gifts that they are giving us. So I think that using essential oils mindfully like this, knowing these things, it's actually just a way of being present with all of that history and the spirituality and the medicine, all of those things. It's important for us to pay attention to those things and to preserve those things. So, all right. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful, safe week. And thank you again, Colleen, for inviting us all together, inviting me here. Thank you, Jeffrey, for being on the call, and see everybody next week.